Awesome. So the flight here was really long. Can you actually put that? Yeah, awesome. So now the timer is running. So the flight here was really long, and I started at my 3 a.m. So I'm kind of tired, but hopefully this wine will help me. Alrighty. So this was the original title for this talk, but I figured pretty soon when I rehearsed it a couple of times that I will never be able to say that, and it's hard to search for that. So let's call this talk multi-platform dots. It's much better. First things first. So I've been doing Android for 5+ years right now, and I'm a TD for that and Fodder. I've done also some other stuff, such as web and iOS, Xamarin, all that. And I'm mostly known from that library right there. If you use that, I'm really sorry. And that blog, which is just now my first name, last name.com, or iirokrankka.com or lirokrankka.com, whatever you want to use. And I've been using Flutter for 18 months now, I guess, something like that. And this is a story about scratching my own itch. So I love going to the movies, and I used to live right next to a Finkino movie theater. And for those that don't know, Finkino is this huge Finnish movie chain. It's so huge that they are basically in a monopoly position. It's like everybody goes there. And I'm usually on my phone when I'm checking out movie showtimes. But the problem is that the mobile experience of that Finkino mobile app it could be a little better. So this is what it looks like, and this is the year 2018. So I feel like this is stuck in the 2012 or something like that. The thing is that it doesn't look good. Well, that's fine, but it's also really, really clunky to use, and it takes like 5 seconds to get to that page if you're lucky. And I thought that there's got to be a better way of checking movies showtimes on mobile. And I found out that these guys have this really amazing XML API. It's nothing fancy like JSON, but it works. And then I thought, because I'm an engineer, let's make it better. But first, I had to come up with a good name, because good names makes everything. And I cannot use Finkino in the name, because that's copyrighted. But I still have to imply that it's a Finkino app. So how do I do that? And it turned out to be really hard. And I had a couple really hard, like really weird names actually, and really bad names. And the last one here, Finkino, was my favorite. And the idea was that it comes with ugly pink theme, but the user pays to get something that looks more pleasant. And I was able to almost finish it. This was the result, so almost finished. But then I found out a good name, Inkino. That basically implies that it's for movie showtimes. I'm really proud of that name. And I decided to build it, now that I have the good name. And this part this took a little while, actually 3 years, and like 5 projects. And this was the most that I was able to build, so I wasn't able to finish that, ever. And I quickly learned that hobby projects, starting them is fun, but finishing them is quite hard. I actually have something like 80 private repos on GitHub, and 19 of them are public, which means that 80 of them, or 60 of them are unfinished hobby projects. And yeah, it took me something like 5 or 6 times to create in native Android which I would say I'm really good at native Android, but I was just like, I don't know, I got carried away or bored or something. It was probably implementing all those recycle view adapters or something like that, which was boring or something like that. Or I was busy not finishing other projects. I don't know what was it about. But then I found about this guy right here. And it was a Saturday night. I was grabbing a couple beers after sauna. And yeah, I stumbled upon this YouTube video. And then I went to this Flutter website, and they said that Flutter is a new mobile app SDK, blah, 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 blah. At least that's the way I heard it, because, you know, if you've done native Android or iOS for a while, you kind of feel weird about these things. And then I was like, yeah, right, okay, yet another SDK for these things. But then I thought that, like, I've done worse things on Saturday night while being drunk, so what the heck, let's do it. Let's try it. And then I actually thought after a couple hours that it's not that bad, actually. And I actually now I think that Fodder is awesome, and it rocks. And why is that? Well, building customized UIs is fast and it's fun. And they have developer-friendly APIs, and there's no like weird stuff that you just have to know that you learned by copying and pasting the same thing over and over again from Stack Overflow. I feel like they were actually able to start from scratch and think like, how would we design this in current year? And with Flutter, we can iterate really fast because we have hot reload, which is a thing that web developers probably know, which is you can be really deep in your app, like logged in and all that, like 5 layers deep. And then you can do some UI changes and reload the UI instantly, so you'll get instant feedback. But with that, we also have fast release builds because we are able to compile that to native code ahead of time. So it's actually really close to the metal, and there's no like interpreter on a release build. And this is actually like one of the amazing apps. Well, it stutters because it's a TIFF or something right here, but it's really smooth. So I saw this Simon Lightfoot guy doing that in 2 hours on a Zoom video chat. He was just basically went to Dribble and saw that this looks good, let's implement it. And he did this in 2 or 3 hours. And I watched that live when he coded that. And that, for me, that's pretty awesome. There's also lots of other awesome stuff that people have done with Flutter. Oh, okay, I also have part 2 for this. Okay, so with Flutter, UIs are consistent across devices and platforms. It's like a portable rendering engine for mobile apps. So Flutter basically renders the UI itself. They're not using native views or web views or anything like that. They basically render every pixel by themselves. And this means that Samsung cannot like have Comic Sans font on your app or break some UI stuff. Like this happens a lot with Android stuff. And we also have headless widget testing, which is really awesome. You can basically say that I have this scrollable list right here, fling it with this velocity, and it should end up right here and trigger like load more, like an infinite list. And we can run that test without an emulator or simulator, which is, to me, that blows my mind, that how is that possible? Before that, actually, the one thing about Flutter is that, wait, I'll do that in the later part. Well, last but not least, Flutter is awesome because it uses Dart. And it totally just said that Flutter is awesome because it uses Dart. Like I said previously, Dart offers like just-in-time compilation for fast development iteration, but you also have the UAT compilation so that your release builds are really fast for the user. And it's strongly typed, which is major plus for me, coming from Java. It has 3-second compiler, so any code that you use gets stripped out, at least on the release builds. And it comes with its own package manager and formatter. I just love this, that there's only one formatter for Dart, and you cannot configure that. So they already decided how all Dart code looks like, so you don't have to have any kind of discussions with your teammates that, no, I prefer this style over this style. All Dart code looks the same, which is awesome. We don't also have proc rules or multi-text issues, which you might have with native Android. Of course, if you use a lot of plugins, then you will run into that in Fodder. And Dart also has really cheap object allocation because it's single-threaded by nature, so you don't need synchronize between threads with some locks and that kind of stuff to allocate new objects. It's built for that. And regarding that, there's also really good feature in Dart and Fodder that Fodder and Dart are able to cooperate. So for example, if the user is scrolling a list of widgets on your screen, Fodder app can actually say to the Dart VM that, hey, now is not the good time for garbage collection because user is interacting with the app. And if you do it's easy on that, it might cause some jank. That's awesome. But generally, Dart is familiar language without any weird stuff. And when I heard about Fodder, I just decided to build a hobby project with it. And what better hobby project than in Kino to do it? And this is not the first version that I ended up with, but this is more of a recent one. But I feel like this is much better than the previous one, the official one. And after 3 years, I was able to finally complete the app with Fodder. It was good. It took me 2 or 3 weeks active development to make the first version. 2 months time frame because I don't get paid for hobby projects. It's all Dart and Flutter, so there's no like Android or iOS specific stuff there. And hot reload is awesome. Like it really saves time. And the UI just works like the way it's supposed to. And it looks, yeah. But Fodder didn't still cure my procrastination because I was still like, I still have one incomplete Inikino app from 1 year ago. But anyway, that's really cool, but does Inikino work on web now? And the short answer is that no, it doesn't, because it's Android and iOS app. So Fodder works for Android and iOS, but it doesn't work for web, just yet. And I feel like if you don't have a web app, you're kind of giving up on some users, at least one. And since you already do this, already did this app with Fodder, can you use Dart, the same language for web? And turns out that you can, and it's actually quite awesome. Dart started back in 2011 as an alternative for JavaScript, and for some reason it didn't take off. I don't know why. But because it has such a long history, the JavaScript support is really good. And there's frameworks such as Angular Dart or Overreact. And for Inikino, I decided to go with Angular Dart because this company called Google uses Angular Dart for building AdWords, and I heard that they make money with AdWords. So I figured out that they have some kind of motivation to keep Angular Dart updated. And a few moments later, I had the web app for Inikino working. So you can do similar stuff with this as well. So you can take a look at the show times, movie details and stuff. Like, it's really basic, but looks good. And it's available in Kino.app. Not that everyone here wants to go to Finnish movies, travel there, but anyway. And what this is accessible because users can do, they can just go to that site and use it instantly, so they don't have to install the app. But they can also install it if they want to, because it's a progressive web app. It works offline, and it's fast, almost. Like, I'm missing 2% on the performance on Lighthouse, but otherwise it's pretty fast, and it gets good results. I actually had doubts about this because, like, my previous colleagues thought that Angular sucks and Dart sucks, and if you use Dart with Angular, that's like worst of both worlds. But it turns out that double negative turns into a positive. It was good. And there's one thing that I left out here that I didn't tell. So with the Fodder app and with the Angular Dart web app, I'm sharing 40% of code between the both clients. And I think this is the best of both worlds, actually, so that you have native apps in the app stores, and then you have progressive web app, and you're sharing code within those and not implementing the same logic all and over again. And yeah, that's really cool. How did I do it? Well, it's all about architecture layering and decoupling. So step one is to use a common language, in this case Dart. And you also want to strongly decouple logic from the UI. And this following stuff is oversimplification, but anyway. So this is bad, don't do this. Let's say this is your web app, and then you want to introduce mobile app. It will look like this. You have two apps, but two completely different code bases, and you have to maintain both. It's not fun. But this is good. Like, you separate your business logic from the UI, and you have really dumb UI layer and business logic resides in a separate layer. And let's say this is your web app, then you introduce a mobile app. It looks like this. Much better. You can share code there and fix bugs for the same code base. So always decouple stuff. And the business logic layer should be platform independent, so there shouldn't be any Fodder or web dependencies there. And this makes testing business logic really easy. It's really cheap to write tests on this kind of business logic because there's no need to spawn any browsers or simulators for testing that. It's just pure business logic. So you can have an input and output and test that works. And as a result, your UI code should be as dumb as possible and lean as possible. And this is a good practice, even though you're not even ever sharing code between web and mobile. And yeah, just do it. I actually forgot that I have memes here. And then you want to pick an architecture and stick with it. And key things to look for, again, no Flutter dependencies here, no web dependencies either. And two widely used options are Redux and blocks. This talks about them, and there's also sample apps about both of them. And the fourth rule is that if you have n supported platforms, you have n+1 Dart projects. So if you support mobile, and you do mobile with Flutter, and then you have a web app, you have 3 projects. One is the core project, which is the business logic. One is mobile, which is the Flutter project. And the last one is web project. And this is also one of those dumb illustrations, but okay, here you have 2 separate apps, and here you have code sharing. And I'm saying mostly UI here because, like, when I say that you have only UI and only business logic, that's never the case, but it should be more of that. And what can be shared there? So you can have localization stuff there in the core projects. I mean, you can have any Dart logic without Flutter web dependencies, tests for that logic, so you can test that really liberally, and those tests are the cheapest tests to write because they don't need any processor stuff. Any API communication, basically, whatever parsing you're doing. We're going to talk about this later. But basically, if you have a like e-commerce app and you have a shopping cart for users, you basically want to share that in the core packets instead of implementing the shopping cart client-side logic on mobile and web differently. I think I'm repeating myself here, yeah. So this is just hammering home those points. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay, I did in with Redux. And shared code with Redux. So here's a couple things to look for there. And if you don't know Redux, oh boy, I didn't prepare for this. Okay, so this is your Hello World Redux counter app in Dart. So the basic thing here is that you have like integer and you add 1 to it. And this is kind of stupid because you would never use this. Use Redux for this, but I'm illustrating a point here. So here's your action. You want to increment something, the count. Reducer is just a function that takes in the current count and an action. And if the action is increment count action, it returns current count and adds 1 to it. Otherwise, we don't know the action, so we just return the current count. Then we set up the Redux store with the initial state of 0. And this would be on our UI, so we can listen to changes in the store. And when the count updates, we'll get notified here. And to increment the count, we dispatch an action. That's it. And yeah, it was a silly example because you would never do a counter app with Redux, but it's hard to explain with a full-blown sample. Okay, here's a case study in the Inkino app, code sharing in the theater list. So basically, on the left, you see the web theater list. On the right, you see the Flutter version. And this is basically used for selecting which theater is closest to you. And you can, when you select the theater, you will see what movies are playing and stuff, you know. And I don't have code for the common logic here because there's a lot of code. But basically, it loads the list of theaters from the XML API. It also parses them to a list of theater objects because it's easier to consume that way. It puts them to it does the Redux magic, yeah. It persists the current theater selection locally because you don't want to, let's say you live in Helsinki and every time you have to choose that, okay, I want to movie show times for Helsinki, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It also loads the persisted theater selection on upload. And here's how Angular Dart component for that would look like. And I've been told that you guys know Angular, but I'm still gonna explain that. So, okay, so here's the entire code for that, but no CSS because I don't want to bore you. Basically, we say in the constructor parameters that we take in a store, and Angular provides that as automatically, which is awesome. And then we expose a getter for the theaters, and we basically select the list of theaters from the Redux store because we need it, and expose that as a getter so that our component template can use that and loop over the theaters and display them. And whenever the users click on the theater, we dispatch an action. And that triggers a lot of stuff in the core module. For example, it loads showtimes and now playing events for whatever theater the user selected, and also persist that theater locally. And this is a Fodder version of this. So we have a stateless widget called theater list. And we obtain an instance of the store by using a store connector widget, which basically looks up on the parents and finds the first store that it finds. And then we basically can say, select the titles from the store and return on that in our converter. And whenever this changes, our builder function gets called again and again with new titles. And then we can basically render them. And there's no, actually the on-click handler is missing for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, I was talking about persisting titles locally, and this is still the same case study. So we need to persist something locally, but the thing is that we have Android, iOS, and web, and different platforms have different solutions for this. So Android has shared preferences, iOS has NS user defaults, and on web we have local storage. And for in some way we have to kind of use all of them because we want to put that logic to our core module, but we cannot import NS user defaults or shared preferences or local storage in that because it violates the pure dot rule. And then again, like we need to store pairs, but we cannot import the APIs to store in them. So that doesn't make any sense. Even Dr. Phil is confused right now, like what's going on? The solution is to inject your dependencies, and I'll show you what that means. So basically you define a common behavior with an abstract class. This, for Java guys, this is interface. So basically you say that we have this contract, and it has a getString method, and it has a setString method which takes in a key and a value. And then we implement that for web and Fodder. And this is the web implementation. It's really long, so be prepared for this. So basically, we have a class web key value store which implements that common interface. Then on the getString method, we call window.local storage and get the correct key. And on the setString method, we set the key. For the Fodder is similar. So Fodder has this plugin called shared preferences, which is basically abstracting both Android and iOS. So we don't have to worry about that. So basically, we do the same dance here. So Fodder key value store implements key value store. We want to get this string. We call shared preferences getString. Same for setString. And this is a stupid example. How would you use that in a common logic? So we have this really advanced business logic, which would be in the core module. But this is like really simple because I don't want to complicate it. And basically, it takes in a key value store. It doesn't take in Fodder key value store, web key value store. It takes key value store, which is the abstract class. Then we call setString on that key value store. And this is a Fodder example. So we create an instance of Fodder key value store right here. And then we pass that to my business logic. And then we can select the tiers without the business logic knowing which kind of implementation lies behind that. Oh, and this applies to like Bluetooth camera as well. So if you have like web Bluetooth stuff, you can abstract that away as well. So you can have an abstract class for that. We don't have a demo here because I don't have a laptop. But you can. It's open source, so you can go and look. So conclusions. Decouple UI and business logic early on. Pick an architecture and stick with it. And keep the UI dumb and lean. And try to have reuse code as much as possible. And special thanks to this awesome dude right here, who made the design in 4 hours. Otherwise, this would be like, I don't know, command line, not like that, but really engineering UI, because I am the UI person. And this should be the last slide. Okay, So that's it. So it's open source, and you can follow me on Twitter and stuff. And I will publish an article series about it like soon. I was also lately in the Boring Flutter show talking about this, but I don't remember anything because I was jet lagged as hell.
So please stay here. I haven't updated you on our process of the Q&A, but we're using Slido for asking. The audience was asking questions all the time that you were speaking. Now I'm going to read a couple of them.
Okay.
Can we switch for the questions? Thank you. Is Fodder a good framework for startups that want to create multi-platform applications, you think?
I mean, I'm working at Reflectly currently, which is a startup using Fodder for creating a multi-platform app. So.
And is it a smart decision?
What?
Is it a smart decision that you've taken for your startup?
Yeah, we're doing pretty great. That's why I joined them. And we are also doing the same stuff that I talked about here with Reflectly. So a web version of that is coming up soon. And like users love it, and we got like design award from Apple. So that's pretty cool.
So I'm going to skip the next question. Maybe you're going to update the people.
It was shit. How were the flights? I had like multiple ones.
How long were they? Like a whole day, probably. How would you compare Flutter with Kotlin, which promises great code reuse and all native approach? Kotlin native, Kotlin Android, Kotlin JS, Spring, question mark.
Yeah, I would compare this way. So with Flutter, you can build the same. You can build apps for Android and iOS with the same code base. If you use Kotlin multi-platform for that, you can reuse business logic, but you still have to implement the UI for Android and iOS specifically. So you will share something like 40%, like here, between Android and iOS, and then you have to do the web UI as well. But with Flutter, you can do like UI for both Android and iOS, and the app as well. And then you only have to implement web separately. So I think that answers kind of.
Thank you. The next question, probably the people liked you too much. They want to just convert you to Bulgarian. Is the alcohol still that expensive in Finland?
Not expensive or expensive.
Well, it seems like
yeah, it is, and it's crazy. We have crazy alcohol laws. Like, for example, here's a restaurant, here's a walkway, and here's a terrace. We have to hire a person to stand here because this walkway is not alcohol zone. And when the customers come to the bar, from the bar, the hired person takes the drink and hands it over this side because the customers can't do that. So that's one example.
Actually, at the end of the day, I tend to click archive on quite many wrong places. So 2 questions that I archived, but I didn't mean to. One of them is why Fodder is better than Xamarin?
Yeah. Do you have, like, is Xamarin Forms a thing? So you can do the UI with that? I guess that's the thing still. I'm not really a Xamarin expert, but I think that, don't quote me on this, but I think on Android, like Xamarin runs on mono VM or something like that. And with Dart, we don't like interpret code on runtime, so it's like compiled natively. I would say that the UI building in Flutter is awesome. I know some Xamarin guys that love Flutter, but that's all I can say. I won't compare it because I don't know shit about Xamarin, basically.
That's good. So do you think Flutter is good for apps that need to scale?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the app, actually. So if you know that Flutter is able to do all the stuff that you need, then yes. But if there's if your app is basically Google Maps, it's kind of, you cannot do that currently. So I would say it depends. But for the apps that Flutter can do, yeah.
Okay, maybe a couple of more questions. We want to really make the greatest possible use of you as you travel through the whole of Europe.
Just ask all the questions.
That's a brave decision, and I'm not sure that you're going to get
Just bring me a bottle of wine and we will be here all night.
This person, he doesn't give up at all. He's going to travel across the whole Europe, across the whole universe, and answer all your questions. How Fodder apps using Java code, in brackets Android, can get smaller in size? So the question is how you get smaller sizes with Java code. Examples using the barcode package.
So, okay, I think it's, so this is talking about like plugin side, because you don't use Java for Fodder?
I think it's rather bridging between native packages and Fodder. Probably if there's something that's not yet available there. If I'm understanding the question incorrectly, though, correct me. But how Fodder apps using Java code, which I believe should be Fodder apps that are bridging.
We can call any Java code, but I'm not sure if that's the question. Okay, well I'll just make something up. So, okay, we can use Java or Kotlin or Swift or Objective-C from Flutter. So you can do any kind of integration for the native Android or iOS apps you want. And recently, background code execution works as well. That was a problem before, but it's not a problem currently. So you can do that. It's called method channels, so you basically pass primitives from one side to another, and you kind of handle that and do some magic there and stuff. But it's actually really good. But I don't know how to decrease that on size. Like, you use Frocard for shrinking Java size, on Android at least. Okay?
How big is the application for Inkino?
What?
How big is the application for Inkino, the native application, the mobile application?
Like megabytes?
Size, yeah.
I think it's something like 5.
Okay.
So the Fodder engine brings a little overhead, but that doesn't scale linearly. So if you are like a huge app, you won't have like 4 times as big app, but you have them 4 megabytes overhead right now. And you could optimize that. Well, in Inkino, no, you can't, because it's optimized already.
Okay, the next question. Thank you for answering those. The general perception of Fodder is that it's very good for prototyping, but not ready yet to complex production applications. What do you think about that?
I think it's ready for production. Like, yeah, and it still depends, like how comfortable you are reading source code and like doing this stuff. But I would say that you can do apps with it. And like reflectly, we are having like 1 million users really soon, and it works. Users love it, and we are making money every day. The same goes for Hamilton. They did a huge app with. Probably you guys have known about Hamilton, so they also have millions of users. They get good ratings, and their scale is pretty huge. But there's also Alibaba that has 50 million users in China. But I mean,
he's confusing, isn't he? Okay.
I would say yes. Like general perception, I feel like, yeah, well, don't trust me. Just try it for 2 hours while you're drunk and trust yourself.
So the next question is actually pretty relevant, and I'm also having a good projection here. I'm going to continue on with the question. So how does Fodder maintains compatibility with the latest versions of Android and iOS? And it's always the question of a hybrid solution that has to cover the newest features of the particular platform. So how does it do it?
I would say that this is awesome in Fodder because it renders every pixel on the screen by themselves. So we don't use native views or web views or stuff. So in that regard, like, it doesn't break that often. Only thing that could break would be some, I don't know, like Samsung breaks the canvas or the OpenGL stuff or something like that. But I guess that question was probably about the material components or Cupertino components as well. But I would say that like Flutter is best for making custom design, not like material or Cupertino. Well, at least, actually in material, Flutter is first-class citizen in that. But I mean, I don't see that as a problem.
Super. So another question of comparison, how does it compare to native script React Native? Are you able to comment on that?
I don't know about native script, but what do I know about React Native? Might be true for native script as well, is that they basically ship like V8 with the app or some kind of JavaScript interpreter, and you have JavaScript code that goes over a bridge, and then there happens like some kind of context switch. They have to save some states and stuff. Every time you go over the bridge, it's kind of costly. So in React Native, every time you do some UI changes, you have to go over that bridge to update the changes to the actual Android view or iOS view. Fodder doesn't have that. We don't, because Fodder renders everything by itself in Dartland, straight to the canvas. We don't have that bridge. But we have that bridge for plugins if you need to do some geolocation. But I would say that it's performant because it compiles to native code, actually.
Could you elaborate on where the business logic is hosted, either with Redux or Block? The second
where it's hosted? Yeah, you basically have 3 Dart projects. One is for web, one is for mobile, and one is for the business logic. So you kind of have 3 folders, 3 projects that you open in your 3 different IDEs, unless you want to do some sim linking stuff.
The question was whether it's Redux or Block. I'm not aware of those technologies, but probably that was. Let me just.
Well, use either one of them, but not both. Well, you could use both, but what was the question actually?
Yeah, just let me just de-archive it in a second.
Yeah.
Sorry. This one was so. Can you please stop voting? Thank you.
So you're going to lose the questions when people vote on them?
No, I'm trying to archive everything that you've answered. So it's the second question, because I'm going to skip the fact that you're a rock star is obvious thing.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's an observation, I think. Can you please take a look at the second one? Could you elaborate on where the business logic is hosted, whether it's Redux or Block?
I mean, it's not hosted in Redux, because in Redux you still call some other kind of stuff there. You make API calls, you persist something. So I would say that the Redux part is hosted in the core Dart project, but it lives alongside with the other business logic stuff. By the way, I do play guitar, but I just wish that I was a rock star. But I took programming because that didn't work out.
I clicked once again. Give me a sec. Sorry for clicking that. So, as Fodder is still in beta, have you had any problems with backwards compatibility?
No, I actually started doing Fodder with, like I said, 18 months ago. So I have a lot of unfinished projects. For example, I have some GitHub app from that time, and I tried to build it like a couple of weeks ago, and it builds. There's some Dart 2 errors, but I was able to resolve those in 15 minutes, so there's no like crazy errors. Something that you can expect, but not crazy errors. So between alpha to like latest release preview 2, there wasn't a hard migration path.
Okay. Now I feel ashamed. The people from the audience, they told me to stop torturing you, so I'm not asking more questions.
Okay.
Actually, I can already tell that it's quite worthwhile that we waited for you, because it was an incredible session. And thank you very much for traveling all the way around Europe and everything to come here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Awesome.